This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Tallman Equipment. They pride themselves on equipping their customers with the tools they need to get the job done right. They are dedicated to set the standard for quality, convenience, and reliability. At Tallman, your opinion is important to them. Rate and review any product or tool you've used on their new website at tallmanequipment.com. Line 11 Clothing Company, making apparel for their first responders with a positive message to patriots that you can be proud of. A proceed of the cost goes to helping our foundation ignite the fire for father engagement. Give them a follow at Line 11 Clothing on Instagram. You could also find them or email them at line11clothing@yahoo.com. And last but not least, Monzingo Knives. Each knife is created with craftsmanship that only a tradesman could provide. Find them on Instagram at Monzingo Knives and get your American-made Monzingo knife today. Welcome to the Show Up Dad, a podcast for hardworking fathers. At the Show Up Dad, we recognize that fathers providing for their children is certainly important. But when men truly understand their unique role and gain the knowledge and skills to be great fathers, they can transform and impact future generations. Our guest today is none other than Mike Kawula. He is a husband and father first and a curious entrepreneur who loves testing different growth marketing strategies. He's used to sell over $100 million in products and services during his crazy entrepreneurial journey, online and offline. He has been featured on CNN, interviewed by Anthony Robbins, and featured in over 100 publications over the last few years. Welcome to the show, Mike.
I am excited to be here today, and I can't wait to have this conversation together. Really looking forward to it.
Man, you got a pretty extensive resume there, brother. That's really amazing.
I appreciate that. It took me a long time to find myself, but I've always had that entrepreneurial bug. It's been a fun journey.
Awesome. I like to start things off by having you give us an overview of how you grew up, Mike, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up right outside New York City. My parents got divorced when I was the age, I believe, 5. So it was just my father bringing us up for a little bit. He ran a business, so he wasn't home a lot, unfortunately. But did find another woman, married her, my stepmother, and we lived right outside the city. It was there's different parenting styles, right? And so my father was very much an authoritarian. Whereas, today I'm more of an authoritative, you could say, as I parent with my children versus at my children, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of like his way, 100%. There was no discussion about it. So, grew up in a very wealthy town. My father did very well, but it was more presence over presence. So I parent from presence, meaning being present with your children versus gifting them stuff. And so for my father, we had very good Christmases. We traveled, had very nice vacations. And I know deep down, he passed away, unfortunately, when I was in college, that he loved me. But he wasn't somebody that would show it.
And is it safe to ask you, Mike, how was that? How did that affect you, that relationship, that distant relationship that he shared with you? How did that affect you?
Yeah, I think I told you I was a very wild teenager, very much so. So, for instance, I got my license when I turned 17 like everybody else, and by the end of my 17th birthday, I had lost my license. So it was kind of like one of those things, when the cat's away, the mouse will play, right? And so I was a good student, highly respected. I did Taekwondo my whole life, so I definitely did respect adults. But just, again, it was a very tough relationship at home. I had a stepmom that, definitely you could tell did not have the same feeling towards me that she did with my 2 half-brothers. So, when my father had passed away, I stuck around and really, I was in college, but, worked full-time to help the family out. And also parented and, visited my brother who played Division III college basketball 4 hours away, and I would drive up every weekend to go watch the games, So, I kind of stepped into that parent role when that had happened, but never had that really close relationship with my stepmom, unfortunately, either. And my biological mother left me at the age of 6. She continued to see my older brother and sister, but said I was too much like my father and didn't want to have a relationship with me. So, from a childhood standpoint, it was interesting, psychologically speaking, you could say, and but it made me who I am, and who I've become, because I just learned a lot through it.
We can learn a lot as boys, right? We can learn a lot from our fathers and how they relate with our mothers, right? How did
100%.
How do you remember him interacting with your stepmom, if you remember that?
Yeah, no, and I do very clearly. It was very much the same thing. I remember my father, he would, on the way to the office, he would open up, the drawer to maybe get a spoon out, for instance. And if that drawer wasn't the way that he wanted it, you would think he was military. He wasn't, but he would just pull out the whole drawer and just dump it over and just say, have it cleaned by the time I'm home. And so, it was just interesting from that standpoint. But again, my stepmom was 20 years younger than him. So, I'm not really, from that standpoint, sure what the relationship was there, but they ended up having, 2 children together, and they loved on those children, which, I do have to say, again, deep down, I know my father loved me. He was just a very, very strict individual with everybody he dealt with, and I think it was because, and we'll discuss about my career and kind of things I've learned along the way, but I definitely feel it was one of those things that, because he ran, a large company and had to control all day, when he came home, he still kept that control hat on instead of realizing that parenting is much different, right? And so he wasn't, it was more, I'm the CEO of my business, I'm the CEO of the household also. And, we both know that that's not the way to parent.
No, but the sad thing is, Mike, like you're talking about, there's so many men out there, these fathers who don't turn it off. I know I didn't. I yelled at my guys all day when I was pushing a crew, and when I came home, I did the same thing with my wife and daughter. Yeah. And there's consequences for that.
It definitely is, and I mean the reality is there is no playbook on parenting, right? And so a lot of us, we're thrown into it, and without even realizing it, we're parenting the way that we were parented. And so it's always good to really slow down and just ask ourselves questions. And, I've done that a lot more. I wish I could hit the rewind button to when my kids were much younger, because, I became an entrepreneur for my kids, but then my businesses started controlling me, and I wasn't home for the exact reason that I became an entrepreneur, is to have more flexibility in my life. But next thing you know, I was working harder. And then when that business became systematized and didn't need me as much, what did I do? I bought another business and then started, just pounding myself into it. Now the last 3 years, when I look back at it, guess what? I'm exactly the same way my father was from that standpoint. Now, I parent differently, but I wasn't home in the beginning days, like I wanted to be, for the exact reason I became. I mean, I remember 9/10/2001. I came home the day before 9/11, and my wife had told me, she was pregnant. It was going to be our first child together, and I went in that next morning. I worked on Wall Street, and I resigned, an hour before the first plane hit. And so it was like one of those things, luckily I had a good relationship with my managers and what have you, because probably not the best time to be starting a business, right? But I became that entrepreneur because I wanted to have that flexibility in my schedule and be there for my kids growing up, because I traveled a lot. And then next thing you know, what am I doing? I wasn't home. So to your point, exactly. It's interesting.
Man, I think that's an amazing story. I mean, especially with 9/11 just passing here, a week ago or so.
Yep.
I mean, that's insane. You literally resigned 1 hour before the first plane hit. Did I hear that correct?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I literally was on the phone when the plane had hit with my partner, who was supposed to be in the World Trade Center, yelling at him because he wasn't at the office, and then stuff was falling on his car at the time. It was, we all have stories, obviously, of where we were, what happened at that time, but it was, somebody up above, God, was definitely looking out for me, because I should have been the one in the city that day, but I wasn't. I was across the river in a place called Secaucus.
That is so crazy. I mean, I know this is kind of a little off topic, but did you have any kind of like survivor's guilt or anything like that because of that?
No, I mean, I knew a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I lost, a lot of good friends. I was in investments. I'd always loved investments. And, that's what I went to school for. And just, today I'm still in this field, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it was, I mean, everybody's got stories. It's just crazy. And then the consequences of those that volunteered their time, unfortunately, afterwards, and not even realizing, what it did to them. I mean, I just, lost a friend 2 years ago that, unfortunately had cancer, believed to be from, being part of the cleanup there. So, again, it was just, I had friends who were stranded out on the West Coast that worked with me because, again, we all traveled a lot. That day I was, again, I don't know why. I should have been in the city in the World Trade, but I wasn't. I was in Secaucus. And, I just, it was crazy.
Man, thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, that's amazing. Thank you once again. So let's get back to this, brother. What did your dad show you about being a good dad?
His work ethic. I say, that's one thing. So, I mean, it's a balance, right? And so, work works at the end of the day. We have to, we have to train our children. And I say train, right? Because, it's, this month I'm teaching, I do a Bible class for 4th and 5th graders at my church. And, this month our memory verse for the kids is work at everything you do with all your heart. Work as if you're working for the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about taking initiative and all. And so that's one thing, my father was very good at. Whatever he did, he gave it his all, right? And so, again, his intentions were well. And even, not to get too, sobby here for anybody, but I was, again, in college. I was a sophomore when he passed away. And, I worked also for a company called Allstate Insurance. And so, I was pretty good at my job, good at sales. And I came home that night to have dinner, and I had to go back to the office to close up and lock up and what have you. And so I told my father that night, I was like, hey, my boss had bought me, a ticket or a hotel room and 2 tickets for me and a friend to go spend the weekend in the city because I had a good month for him. And so it was kind of like a bonus, right, that he was giving me. Super excited. And my father said, isn't this your weekend to work, to cover the office? Because we alternated weekends. I was like, yeah, but it's my boss. And he's saying that he'll cover it. He goes, no, you have a responsibility. And so he and I, like always, we got into a fight. And I sneaked off, went to the office, called my boss to let him know, told him. He met me there, and I was underage, but he still got me into a bar, brought me out for drinks, and probably not the smart thing to do. But got home that night late. Father was in bed already, and stepmom, and there was a note on my desk, and it said, this is, again, just so powerful. Things come to those who wait, but only those things left over by those who hustle. And it's an Abraham Lincoln quote. And he wrote me this long message, and it was a life lesson. I was so mad. I remember I crumpled up that letter, just angry. And I went to bed, and at 2 or 3 that morning, my stepmom came running down the hall, screaming for me to come, and went into her room, and my father had passed away.
Oh, man.
So, yeah. Anyway, so, we all have, interesting stories, but it was like, wow, what a way, what a last message for me. And so, that's one thing. If I look back as an entrepreneur in the way I've always worked, it's, with that mentality of good things come to those who wait, take initiative, work hard, right? Go be the one. And that's what I do with everything I do. But yeah, that was his last message to me.
Wow, that's definitely I could see how that's life-changing, and I mean, it was just powerful. I mean, just you opening up and just sharing that with us. I mean, that raw emotion that you have, man, it's crazy. I don't know how many guys I've talked to, and, when you ask them that question, how was your relationship with your father? You know what I mean? About 7 out of 10 of them are going to cry. If they're really real with themselves, they're going to open up, and they're going to, you know what I mean? They're going to have emotions behind it. Yeah. And it's
you gotta, and especially if they're a father themselves. right?
Yes.
And you're looking at your own children, and you realize, like, sometimes, again, like, I have a 19-year-old boy who's up in New York now with my wife, helping my father-in-law. They've been there, unfortunately, 3 weeks and probably another 2. He's 82, closing up his house, and he's moving down here. And, I look at sometimes the way, my relationship is with my son, right? And, like, I always do try to pause to tell him, like, hey, I love you, because it's something my father really never said, right? Again, very, very, my way. Whereas, I try to, I always text my son, I love you, and you're doing a good job, and just to let him know, I appreciate who he is and who he wants to become as an individual. And, yeah, it's important, I think, as fathers that we need to do that.
No, I can't agree with you more. I'm kind of the same way. Never really heard my dad ever tell me he loved me or was proud of me. And it hurts. It does. I know he knows that, and I know he loves me in his own way. But for me, it led me to, I grew up in a performance-based household to where I chased after attaboys. I had to. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I shared this story on another podcast here about how when you grow up in that type of household, it's chaotic, right? You have no control because of this authoritarian figure, right? Where it's my way or the highway. Okay, and that's control for whatever reason, whether it be, and we all know that control is fueled by fear of something, right? Fear of the unknown or whatever.
100%.
And what's fear? Fear is an acronym for false evidence exactly appearing real. So with that being said, he led by control, and sometimes that control was fueled by, instilling this fear into us. Like, hey, man, you're going to do this or else. And
exactly.
I started catching myself doing that with my own children as well. And I saw the damage I was creating, and I was just like, something's got to stop, man. This is not the right way. And that's what kind of embarked on this.
I was whacked all the time, man, as a child, like with a thing called pussy willows, those little sticks. I don't think parents would be getting away with that today in today's culture. And I am all for, like, I've never had I've never struck my kids. I'm not against a parent if they need to take a belt out to their kid's butt if they're disrespectful in any way. But I've never had to do it because I think of the fact that I just constantly am always pausing and asking myself, how can I be different? And having that conversation, right? And, like, really just making it more of a problem solving. Like, I literally just had a conversation the other night with a teenage daughter that wasn't easy, man. It was not easy, especially, my wife's away, and so I had to have this conversation about something I really didn't want to. But, the eyes roll and everything, and so we naturally, right, we know, right? We're looking at it, and I'm like, stop rolling those eyes, and it's like, they come back at you, and it's like, you got to, manage your emotions individually and try to work through it and solve, the problem. And for me, sometimes that just means it's hard with my type of personality, but walking away to come back and say, we got to address this a little bit later on.
It's very hard, especially with men, because, Dr. Emerson Eggerichs talks about how men need respect and women need love, right? That's our primary need is respect as men. So when they're rolling their eyes, they're back talking and all this stuff, I mean, we're feeling disrespected, right? In a sense.
100%.
And what I started doing too is like, what drove me up the wall with my teenage daughter is when she's like, I already know that. I've heard you. And instead of getting offended, I started getting the thought, well, I must be doing my job, because if she can repeat back to me, right, what I just told her and say, yeah, I get it, Dad, I got it, then that means I'm doing my job. So I started looking at it through that perspective lens, to where instead of getting offended about it and you're going to be in trouble, I'm taking away your phone or whatever, I started looking at it like, man, I'm doing my job. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, 100%. And we have to, because we can't leave it up to somebody else. We can't. And so, it's hard. But back to what we were just saying earlier, work works, right? It does. But it takes work.
It absolutely does. Now, with that being said, Mike, what trends or information can you share with us about what you see in the state of fatherhood today?
It's interesting, because you mentioned fear, right? And so I think a lot of, fathers, parent from fear sometimes and not understanding. And hey, like again, I have teenage kids, right? And so they want to date. Mm-hmm. And, what is all of that about? Like, hey, I know what I was like as a boy, right? And so there's Mike not in control and having to, try to control it, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm very active in social media. So my career is around social media, right? So mm-hmm. I understand it. But I have so many friends who just don't understand it, right? Because we didn't grow up with it. And so these kids, by the time, like if you mention Facebook to them, they're like, face who? Like, that's old, right? Like, they're on Snapchat and all. And then we all hear these things in the media about, these things, but they're headlines, right? And so they're meant to, again, the media, what does the media do? They scare us, mm-hmm. right? And so they make it unknown. And so I think, at the end of the day, fathers, and I see this at church with the ones who are very active in their children's lives, there's so much coming at us, mm-hmm. and things are changing so fast because of technology that sometimes a lot of us feel lost, right? Because we can't duct tape everything together. Mm-hmm. Again, we've got work, we've got a relationship at home with, our wife, and then, our friends, and then at the same time being a parent. And things are changing so fast. Kids are developing so much faster than mm-hmm. they used to, right? They even say, it's scientifically, it's a fact. It's the lights that are coming into our kids right now. Girls develop at a faster pace than they did, 20 years ago because of the light that comes off of the cell phones, right? The light that comes off of the iPads that are in their hands 24/7. Mm-hmm. And so I think from a fatherhood standpoint, a lot of us, it's just, we need to have a community of other fathers, mm-hmm. And, not fathers that are sitting around at a bar, because it's just not going to lead to a good situation, so, not to get, preach religion to everybody, but, find good fathers mm-hmm. who you can, have as a community and really be able to speak with them when, that whirlwind of fatherhood is hitting you day in and day out.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's crazy too, because I mean, they have these groups for men all over, right? They they have a men's group for talking about trauma or whatever like that. You know what I mean? I think it's equally important to have that group of men that you can go to, just like you talked about, But the key word that you said was good father, right? Because obviously you don't want to be hanging out with somebody who's beating their kids or whatever. You know what I mean? Because you are who you hang with. That's a lesson that I learned from my old man. You know what I mean?
100%. And like when you look at like all the top channels like that are out there, just like let's take social media for example, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at like things that talk about humor, things that talk about sports, mm-hmm. things that talk about movies, right? Shower thoughts even. I was just seeing today, do you believe shower thoughts on Reddit has 25 million subscribers to it? But when you look at parenting or dads, it's under 1 million. And where are people, that just tells you, like, we're all looking to escape, but what is the most important thing? It's our kids, like they're our future. And so, from a priority standpoint, I just think, again, it comes back to that whole slowing down, just saying, wait, this is, maybe I need to watch one game instead of all 3 games on Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. And spend some of that time with them. Because it's fast, and I can say having 3 teenagers, I know people used to tell me this when I was younger and I didn't realize it. It's like a snap of a finger, and it's like they're teenagers, one's graduated, one's graduating this year, and another one of mine is graduating in 2 years, and it's just like, I can't believe how fast it went.
I like that key word you said, priority. Because you will make time for what's important to you. Right? I mean,
100%.
You could always make time, like when, I know for me, like if it's not important to me, like, I'm busy. But if it's important, you damn well, Skippy, I'm going to create 25 hours in a 24-hour day to get to it. You know what I mean? So, as fathers,
and also,
gotta have
you've
those
got
priorities.
You have a teenage daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, when do they want to typically talk? It ain't in the morning.
No.
It's not in the afternoon or when you're coming home from work. A lot of times it's like, it's late at night when we're ready to to say, I'm going to bed, right?
Yes.
And that's when they're ready to open up, and you can really build that bond, that connection the most. But, it's that priority of saying, you know what, I'm going to have to disrupt my life a little bit, and I'm OCD, but I don't know if I brought that up in the beginning, but like my life, it lives by a calendar, and everything I do, it's like, I am robotic. If somebody wanted to take me out, it is very easy to do it. You know what time I'm walking, what time I'm at the gym, what time I'm, walk through my church doors every Sunday. Like, everybody just jokes about it because they know me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it goes to bed, like going to bed, like I believe in I'm getting a certain amount of sleep, so I can be at my best.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? Sometimes I got to put that aside. Priorities.
Mm. Now, that to me, that's like that OCD you're talking about. To me, that's being structured. And I believe that children do need structure.
100%.
How is that played with your children as far as you having that militant type structure for them?
Yeah. So, it's funny because, again, back to I remember growing up how strict my parents were with grades.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and just things did not come easy to me. I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm OCD also, right? Like my mind, like I have ideas all the time, right? So I had to work very hard, and I'm an avid reader today. But man, did I hate reading when I was growing up. I just it was like Dracula and the Cross, stay away from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I look at my own kids, so my father was extremely strict with grades. For me, I'm active in my kids with the school. Like I'll email the counselor. One thing I think a lot of parents do today, I don't know if you've ever seen that funny meme of where, it shows like in the 1960s and the 70s, it was, the parents on one side of the desk, right, with their kid next to them of the teacher's desk, and the teacher's on the other. And then, today it's basically, the parents are like yelling at teachers, right? Mm-hmm. And so, to me, it's like I want my kids to have, stand up for themselves, so I always, make them like, hey, speak to the teachers about things. This is not my responsibility. It's not my job. That is your job to do that. If you need me to step in. But my kids were out the first 2 weeks of school this year because of COVID. The whole household, unfortunately, got it. And, they in high school, as you know, work just piles up, and they're competitive cheerleaders. So, there was just a lot of things. So for me, I stepped in, and, I've been speaking back and forth with the guidance counselor, but I want my kids to create their own schedules, but I also let them create it. I just make sure that, again, like, okay, when are you going to be doing homework today? You don't got to do it on dad's time. I grew up that way. Like, hey, you got to do it this way. I don't think that's the right thing, but hey, how much homework do you have? You got 2 hours? Okay, great. You have cheerleading for 3 hours? Great. That's 5 hours right there. And it's 3 o'clock right now. And so that takes you to 8. Are you going to eat? Okay. Are you going to be texting your friends or FaceTiming or whatever the heck they do? Okay, great. You know what I mean? And like, let's structure out your day and look at it. So in this way, it's not like, oh, poop. And next thing you know, it's 2 in the morning, right? And so, again, but I'm not creating it, but I help them to make sure that they're doing it. So it's hopefully when they leave the house, they're going to do it, just naturally in life. I mean, school, man, like, I don't understand it. We're focused so much on the wrong things also. That's another thing. Like, I just, sat all my kids down recently, and we, they each have dreams of what they want to be when they grow up, right? And so, we went on to some different job board sites and said, all right, here's what the average pay is for these jobs. Okay, where do you want to live, like, when you rent an apartment? So we're like, okay, here you got to rent. And so I got a whiteboard out. I have a big whiteboard in my office. And we started whiteboarding everything out. All right, how about electric? How about gas? And it was funny. One of them, by the time we were done planning out everything they did, I said, hey, you got no food on here, man. Like, you left food out. How much are you going to spend on food? Oh, $100 a month, Dad. $100 a month? And then, so it was just such a good experience. But, that's the stuff that, again, they're not teaching in the school. So I think that's where it comes to our responsibilities, as fathers, definitely, to show them this stuff, to show them, like, my dad never showed me how to change a tire. I think every father should be doing that with their kid, showing them how to hang a picture. Even whether it's a daughter, there's no reason why we can't do that with our daughters also.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, those are definitely valuable life lessons. I know one time my sister, my nephews, they, we pulled up and she was putting gas, and she got out of the car to put gas. And me growing up, that's a no-no. A woman don't get out of the car to put gas. You know what I mean? Just two strapping young lads in the back of the car. They're on devices, and I look at them and I tell them, like, what the hell is wrong with you? Get out of the car and put gas. They both look at me like, we've never done that. I'm like, really? So, instead of getting mad at them, I was like, okay, come on, get out. Let me show you. This is what you do, blah, blah, blah. And I had to run through the whole thing because they're not going to do what they haven't been shown. You know what I mean? But
100%.
I guarantee you they're not going to forget that lesson, though.
Yeah. Like, if you look at your kids, and it's like wondering, like, to that point, like, do you see them open a door for elders or for a lady, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're not doing it, look at yourself and ask yourself, am I doing it? Because they follow what we're doing. We might not think that they're listening, but they 100% are.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, they're watching us. They're like little mirrors all the time.
Yep.
There's a book, okay, that I heard you speak of last time we spoke. Okay, it was called The Secret of the Millionaire Mindset.
Love it.
So tell me your thoughts about that again, because when we're talking about it, you had some really good points on there. But if you can share with our audience about that'd be great.
Yeah, it's just, again, back to, like, and I'm not, trying to push down on our education system, but the reality is like, I don't even understand everything that they're forcing these kids to learn, but we're forgetting the basics. Like, again, we look at COVID right now, and how many people needed government assistance, right? It was a tremendous amount. Why? People didn't have 3 months of savings. They were living, month to, paycheck to paycheck or what have you. So, Secret of a Millionaire Mindset, one of my all-time favorite books. It's T. Harv Eker. And he just goes through 17 principles, but I believe it's 17. But he talks about like little things that we implant in our kids' heads at a young age, and we don't even realize that. Like, if we're opening up the menu, or we're, I don't know, you bring your kids to, somewhere at, like, McDonald's, and you might say, get the cheaper one up there, cheaper. And it's like kids hear cheaper in their head, cheaper in their head. And then next thing you know, they're growing up with this, like, this thought about money and, like that cheap mentality or what have you. And so T. Harv Eker just kind of reshapes everything on the way that we should think about money and talk about money. It's not necessarily a book for kids, but I think it's a good one. Another one of my favorite ones is, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's by Dale Carnegie. But his daughter wrote a book, and it's How to Win Friends and Influence People for Teen Girls. And so it's written by Donna Carnegie, I believe is her name. Phenomenal book. Bought it for my daughters. Really, really an amazing book with great lessons. So I don't know if you've ever read, Dale Carnegie's book. It's, obviously,
No.
It's an extremely famous book, but highly recommend it. I bought I'm constantly trying to give my kids books or audio books, depending upon what their preference is. Have you ever heard of Way of the Warrior Kid?
Yes.
Jocko?
Yeah.
Jocko?
Yep.
Oh, man. I recommend that to everyone. Doesn't matter if you have a teenager or a little kid. I mean, just what a story, and kids really resonate with it. I think he's a Navy SEAL or what have you, but
yeah.
Just an amazing book with life lessons. So, those are just, a few. But again, it's a lot of them, they go over things that they're not being taught in school, right? And so, kids are taught calculus and trigonometry and algebra 2, but at the end of the day, they don't know how to balance a checkbook.
Right.
Right. And so they don't know basic finances. And if we're not doing that as parents around the dinner table with our kids, we're doing a disservice to our kids, just leaving it to the schools or leaving it to somebody else to teach them because they're not going to. And that's not a good parent, in my opinion. That's our responsibility.
No, I agree with you 100% because when I went to the military, I was 17 turning 18, okay? And when I got there, that was one of the courses that they taught us was how to balance a checkbook. And believe it or not, like if you bounce checks in the military, dude, that was an article against you. I mean, you can get in trouble for that. You know what I mean? They held you at a higher standard, but they also taught you the importance of writing those checks, balancing your checkbook, stuff like you said, life lessons that we should have learned, you know, that they're not teaching in school, and you know, parents are forgetting. Another one that I've seen, and I just saw this the other day, is when you go to the store and you get change, right? The way I was taught was that you count back the change and you go from the money up, right? Well,
to the dollar.
Exactly. Well, dude, nowadays you go to a store, they'll give you a wad of money and change in your hand, and here you go, bye. Here's your receipt. And you're just like, what the heck? You know what I mean? And I started realizing that. I was like, man, my dad, you know, he never taught me that way. If he would have seen me do that, he would slap me upside the head and be like, dude, you count back that change. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. I agree 100%. It's did you ever hear Troy Dunn? Have you heard that name before?
No.
He wrote a book. It's like How to Raise a Future Millionaire. It's called Young Bucks. Mm-hmm. I interviewed him a couple of years ago. Amazing individual, but you know, good book. And it just talks about, one of the things in it is about how every kid should have a part-time job. Mm-hmm. You know, and kids don't anymore. They don't. Like, you know, it's all about sport, right? And full-time. Like, it's not even like multiple sports, which is extremely healthy. It's about one sport, right? Travel sport. And it's like, whether it's baseball or whatever it is, that's their sport, and they're doing it year-round. And you know, there's just so much power, I think, in kids having, you know, a part-time job. And you know, Troy talks a lot about that in his book.
Yeah, and I could resonate with that, because I mean, me growing up, I was in kickboxing, I was in boxing, I was in wrestling, you know, karate, you name it. I played a little bit of baseball, football.
How about your kids?
No, nothing yet. They're still real young. My daughter plays tennis, though. She's played varsity tennis since she was in 7th grade, and she's in 10th grade now. So,
if you notice that difference when you look at her and like all of her friends, they probably are all like either one sport, maybe two.
Yes.
Whereas all of us growing up, we were playing multiple sports.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and not only that, you had to carry on a job, and you had to have good grades. Like me, I had to have a part-time job, and I remember it was pushing carts. Remember back in the day, you know, at grocery stores, you didn't have to bag your own groceries or anything like that. There was a little kid there that would bag your groceries, load them up for you. That was me. I was the kid who pushed the carts and gathered the carts and walked the ladies, you know, groceries to their deal and unloaded them. And, you know, once in a while they'd give you a little tip or whatever. You know what I mean? I was making like $3 an hour.
Newspaper route. And they don't do newspaper routes anymore.
Nope.
You know, and then when you ask some parents, like, you know, they had a fundraiser for my daughter's cheer recently. Mm-hmm. And, like, you know, I wanted the kids to go door to door, you know, and go stand out in front of the store and ask. And people are like, you know how dangerous that is? Like, what are we raising?
Wow.
You know, like, you know, go with somebody else. It's crazy. But on the sport thing, I know I'm throwing out a lot of books, but you've got to, if you can, have a guy by the name of John O'Sullivan on your show. He wrote a book called Changing the Game, and I think every dad should buy that book and listen to it, or at least listen to him on a podcast go through the book, because he talks about how many kids are quitting sport by the age of 13 because of the fact that we as parents are pressuring them. And when you ask kids why they quit their sport, it's got nothing to do with the actual sport. The number one reason is the car ride home. They cannot stand that, you know, that coaching from the sideline. And there's nothing wrong with giving advice. And hey, I mean, we get passionate, right? We love watching our kids. I love watching my kid play basketball. I love watching my daughter on the mat. But at the end of the day, you know, sometimes we have to step back and check ourselves, because, you know, what are we kind of like pushing on them and we don't even realize it. So he goes through a whole bunch of parenting tips throughout the book, through his years of being, you know, a professional soccer coach. You know, I think he played professional soccer also, but, you know, now he just does it for college and for high school. And an amazing individual. Definitely get him on sometime, because he could offer this audience so much awesome advice. And we don't even realize it until we stop. And if you read the book or hear him, you're like, oh my gosh, that's me sometimes. And then, you know, next thing you know, bam, our kid's quitting the sport, and it's because of us, and we didn't even realize it.
Man, that's funny, because I was just thinking now, I quit wrestling. I mean, I went all over. You know, I was on a wrestling team and everything. I was really good at wrestling, both me and my younger brother. And I quit wrestling in high school because of that. I was burnt out. I'd been wrestling since I was 6 years old. You know what I mean? And that whole mentality of if you don't win, you're going to get your butt kicked, you know what I mean, type of deal. I mean, it got too much. It was like, I don't want to be dealing with this, you know? But I can definitely see that.
You go to some of these events, you see kids getting yelled at in the side or in the bathroom. My wife will get her at cheer events all the time. Moms yelling at their daughters, you know, about the way they performed up on the mat. And it's like, you know, I mean, yeah, we don't realize it, just scars. We all have scars, right? And like, so I'm 49. I got scars from when, you know, I remember, like, my father once, he left for the office, and he's like, we were having a pool put in. He's like, you know, again, he made me work hard, right? So he's like, I had to dig the hole to our backyard by the pool where I guess they were laying the electric. And there's some type of, I guess, ordinance rules. It has to be 18 inches down or whatever. Like, they actually come with a tape measure of the town.
Yeah.
I remember my father coming home and literally measuring it and, like, turning around and whacking me in the face saying I didn't dig it the right way and, like, getting the shovel out. And I remember being out there late at night doing it. And so, you know, it scars. And that's a scar. Like, today I look at it and I'm like, ooh, you know what I mean? Like, oof, I hope I'm not like that, like with that particular, right? And so it's that balance, the yin and yang, and it's so hard to find.
Oh, it is. I mean, man, you just saying that just brought back a memory for me, too, is we were doing because we grew up, you know, on a farm where you'd have to pick up bales of hay and stuff like that. And the property started progressing, you know, as we started going more and more with cattle. So we started having to make bigger places to put our hay to be covered, right? And we were building one, I remember, with my dad, and I was having to hold these poles while he was standing on a ladder. And he's driving them in with a sledgehammer that weighed 35 pounds. And he's telling me, don't look up, hold on to that damn pole. Or I'm gonna, you know what I mean? And don't be afraid, he was telling me. And he's swinging and hitting it. And every time he hit, my hands would just ding and, you know, just come off the pipe and the vibration it's holding. But you're afraid because, you know, you're more afraid of what he's going to do to you if you don't hold it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Versus him missing and killing you literally with a 35-pound sledgehammer, you know?
Holy cow. Holy cow.
Yeah, crazy stuff like that, you know what I mean? But I wanted to ask you something, brother. We had talked, you know, when I talked to you on the phone previous about the importance of building your life around your family, not your career. How did you come to learn that valuable lesson? Like, what did you see in your family?
Yeah, so, you know, again, I think I told you, you know, the 9-10 and why I became an entrepreneur for it. But then, you know, fast forward, you know, to 2018, I had a software company that went from 0 to 10,000 customers to 0 overnight. You know, our app got suspended by Twitter, and the company just closed. And so, you know, obviously, you know, here's Mike just riding this, you know, success train the last, you know, almost 18 years of having kids, and then just out of nowhere, everything changed. And so, it was very rough, but I think, you know, God works in weird ways, right? There's always, you know, there's a message for us. And that message for me that I had to learn was, you know, hey, I wasn't there as much with my children as the reason I became an entrepreneur, and I needed a wake-up call, and it was that moment that I realized it. You know, and just as I remember, like, I didn't know what I was going to start next as an entrepreneur, but me and my son, we went for a ride across the country to a conference that I was going to speak at, and I knew somebody there, so, you know, I was just going to go and network and see what's next for me, and, you know, we were supposed to be there like 2 days, man. We ended up spending a week. We had a blast and just, you know, took our time. And I was like, why haven't I done this more? And then, you know, it was just that, it was that forced slowdown because I don't think I would have slowed down without what had happened, right? It just, you know, I lost everything. I don't think, you know, I know for a fact that things were going so good that I just continued to put more on my plate. And so being forced by, you know, the powers to be to say stop and slow down just caused me now as a, you know, building a new company. You know, my priorities are, you know, I have on my calendar, literally, like I had a big potential of a huge investor this past Sunday. that wanted me to talk to them. I don't talk on Sundays. It's church and my family. I'm not doing it. It's priorities. I think you had said that earlier, right? And so, it's the universe works in weird ways, right? And so, but ultimately, I'm a big believer God always wins, and he was like, Mike, you got to pay attention because you haven't been listening in the last 18 years. So, I'm going to make your life miserable. Mike loves money. Mike loves working. I'm going to take that all away from you. And show you, make you really dig deep to find your priorities. And so I found my priority.
And sometimes it's better when you look, hindsight's 20/20, when you're going through that pain. Obviously it's not fun at all. I've been there as well. But sometimes it's better that happens than getting that call at night that, hey, your child, you got to come, make sure this is your child because they're in the morgue. And I've heard a lot of stories like that because, we get busy, and when we get busy like you did, stuff starts suffering, right? Because there's no such thing as multitasking. Something's going to suffer. Something's going to break, right? So when that happens, our children have the uncanny ability of getting your attention, good or bad, whether it be, getting into Yale, right? Because they did a good job, or you getting that call at 2 a.m. saying, hey, man, you got to come pick up your kid. They're in jail or whatever. They're going to get your attention is what I'm getting at. So it's better that the universe or, like I like to say, God, puts the kibosh on how fast we're going. Because sometimes we get too fast. We get busy and, things get out of priority. Things get out of whack. There's no balance that everybody's trying to find, right? You don't get that balance and then something suffers.
It's true.
So
it was a wake-up call for me, my friend. But it's one I'm grateful that I had because it brought me back to my church. It's it's made me a much better father. It's made me really fall back on what I ultimately believe, which is our presence over presence. Right? We can't buy their love. We can, we have to be there to lead them, to show them how to, if it's a son, how to be a man. If it's a girl, teach them, how to be, be a lady and, be respected by men, respect who they are. Back to what you said a moment ago. I don't know if you've read a lot of the recent studies, but, unfortunately, 1 out of 3 kids contemplate suicide, teenagers. Just under 2%, almost 2% of, so 2 out of every 100 will actually attempt suicide. It's real. Why? I mean, I know I've shared with you my beliefs on kids with social media, but it's I think it was who came out with this yesterday? Facebook. Facebook was unfortunately hiding some information, but Wall Street Journal just broke an article. I think it was the other day that 50% of girls feel worse about their bodies, teenage girls, because of Instagram.
Wow.
Because of that. And so when I share that suicide thing, we have to realize, like, if we're not home, we're not paying attention. If we're not the ones, really parenting and having those tough conversations, again, we don't have to be that authoritarian. But we need to be involved, and we can't think that somebody else is teaching them because they're not. And if we don't, back to your point, we're going to be getting that call sometime, and it's not the call we want.
And it's crazy too, because I mean, you look at, all these social media platforms and stuff like that, and absolutely right. If we're not teaching them their value, they're getting their value for what the media says. And now the media says you need filler in your lips. Your hips are too fat. You need bigger boobs, and all these different things that these little girls buy into, which used to be through magazines, right? Because they would see Vogue and all these different magazines saying that this is how a woman looks. Now they're seeing it on Instagram. Now they're seeing it on tic-toc. So it's just compounding in their minds how they should look when they should be getting that from their father, right? Because
they're not happy with how they look, so they use a filter, right?
Yes.
What is that doing to them mentally? I mean, well, when they see a friend that they thought was a friend that's at a party that they weren't invited to, and next thing you know, you think your kid's going through a moment and they don't want to talk right now. So they're up in their room with the door closed. What's going on in their head? the things weighting down. So again, and I'm very pro social media. You know that, right?
Yes.
I think I've shared that with you. And so we need to, as parents, not look at it as the devil, because it's not. But we have to be, very, very active in our kids' lives, and communicate with them the way they enjoy to be communicated. Kids unfortunately, Snapchat today.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, if your kids got Snap and you don't as a parent, what are you doing? Right? Number one, you got to have it. You got to get it. You got to learn it. And then you have to have those conversations with them about it, and what is it doing, to the brain. I texted, I'm pulling this up right now. Last night texted my daughter right before I went to bed. I said, I can elect to change all thoughts that hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I can elect to change all thoughts that hurt, because she had a fight with a friend on social media. But, I was like, you're in charge with how you're going to feel at this moment, right? And again, that's parenting, right? And so how did I message it to her? I messaged it through an app that she's on all the time, because that's the way I can communicate with her.
So instead of demonizing these things that kids are using, because like it or not, that's the way their world's going, you know what I mean? We got to adapt as fathers, right, to reach them on that level. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and show them how to use it. Find accounts. One thing is right. It's a great way to also know who they're hanging out with.
Yes.
In the character of those first people. So yes, I am a creeper. I will go and look at who they are associating with, and then look at those posts of those folks, not just the recent ones, but I'm going to go back and look 6 months. Who is their character? When people come to, my house is the hangout house, so I'm cool with that, right? And I get to know all the folks. But, are they looking me in the eye, when they come into my house, or are they just wanting to even go right up to my daughter's bedroom? No, hang out here. And do I have, a friendship with them? And I have friendships with all their friends, right? And they talk to me. Why? Because I understand them, and, I talk to them the way they want. But, back to that whole social media part, look at what your kids are posting, the stories that they're posting, and then, have a conversation about that and show them other ones. A lot of these, girls today, they wear those, those very short shirts, and, again, they have filters that make their, whatever area look larger than it really does. And, is that the way you want to be portrayed? So, I let them know that the reality is this. HR executives right now, at college admissions officers, guess what they're looking at? They are looking at their social media feed. And here's the scarier thing. If they go to look and they can't, so don't be like a parent, well, that's why I don't let my kids on it. Well, now you're also doing them a disservice, because I speak to a lot of them. Again, I've spent, 2 years interviewing a ton of them. And guess what? If they can't find them on social media, that will be a mark against them.
Really?
So, let them know. Yes. So you are being watched on social media, number one. And number two, that you're being judged by the way that you post, by the way that you comment, by what you like, right? And so if they don't understand that, that is our job, because guess what? They're not teaching this in school, unfortunately. And they should be, 100%, in my opinion. We should be teaching kids how to use it for good. Kids can, imagine if every child, in every community out there with their friends was able to go out there and help, for instance, let's call it any nonprofit, a farm in your local area. You mentioned you grew up in a farm, right? And so we have a local farm here, and, they were terrible on social media. So what did my kids do? They created a YouTube channel for them. They did Instagram posts for them, and they were helping a nonprofit. But through doing that, they learned about, how to connect with the community, how to work with influencers in the local community, how to create and posts that get engagement, and ultimately how to create a digital footprint, not only for that nonprofit, but more importantly, a digital footprint for themselves, because everybody will be looking at their digital footprint in the future. And if they don't have one, mark against them. And if they do have one, what does it say about you as an individual? Are you happy with it? And if you're not, you have the ability to change it today. But the only one to teach them that is us as parents.
Wow. Man, that's crazy how you tied that all in. And, man, when you're just talking about that, Mike, I started seeing the old school with the new school. And what I mean by that is, like you said, know who your kids hang out with, right? because that's one of the things that my father said. Show me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. So instead of, now that everything's changed because you got to adapt, right? Now as fathers, what we can do, like you said, which is such a great idea, is start looking at these profiles. Start looking at these kids that they're talking to you, like you said, and then take it even a step further. Go 6 months back. Find out their character, right? See who your kids
Look at who they're commenting on.
Exactly.
Are they boys? Are they talking about if it's a boy, again, hooking up and what have you, or vaping? I've seen the vape, and then hey, you just said that they don't vape, but they're on there vaping.
Wow. No,
you can learn a lot.
Yes, you can. I mean, instead of being afraid of it, because like you said, it's new, and our tendency, as fathers, is it's new, it's different. I mean, I even see that in our trade, linemen. You know what I mean? We get these linemen who have an extensive amount of knowledge, right, for line work. You put a computer in front of them, and they freak out. Why? It's not that they're dumb. It's not that they can't learn it. It's just it's new, and they don't want to do anything with it. But that's holding them back in their tools, holding them back in the trade. Now you have these linemen that are 60-some, 70-some years old that are broken, that should be in the office teaching, you know what I mean, from a different perspective, but their fear or whatever, don't get me wrong, there's some linemen who just don't give a shit, who'd rather just be out in the field, right? But, because of that lack of knowledge, that fear is holding them back from actually taking it easy for the rest of their life. They've already given her hell, Yeah. But, Mike, so awesome to have you on here, brother. I'd like for you right now to just share with our audience how they can get a hold of you. I would deeply appreciate that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so, I mean, anybody ever any questions about books or questions about even like, hey, Mike, my kid's on this, and how do I watch, because to back up, don't go out and friend request your kid's friends on there. That's creepy. Okay.
Yeah.
So learn the platform first. So if you've got questions on that, I'm very open on social media. Any of the major profiles, my name is just Mike Kawula, and then you can also email me. My first name is Michael and the name of my company is cbaventure.com. cbaventure.com. So I'm very up with social media. I love helping parents out. I mentor teenagers around the country. I have my company is, we start, grow, and monetize for investors YouTube channels. So it's a weird type of investment. I know most people are used to buying stocks. We help people buy YouTube channels and make money from the ads that are on it. So it's pretty cool. But because of that, I've learned so much over the last 10 years of social media, and I understand every aspect of it. And I also know how kids can create fake profiles for their parents, the profile that you will see, and then the real profile that they're on. And I know how to find those. I have cyber crime friends who are in the law enforcement, so they taught me all the tricks. Happy to share them if anybody's got questions.
Well, right on. Once again, thank you for coming on our show, Mike, and we appreciate you, and we know this is going to create great value for our listeners. Thank you once again.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.